The gavel had not even dropped yet when somebody laughed. Not loud, just enough to carry across the auction barn. The kind of laugh people give when they think no one will remember it later. Harlan Voss stood near the front rail with his cane tapping once against the concrete, and a livestock buyer leaned toward his neighbor and asked, loud enough, "What's a blind man doing at a cattle auction?" Harlan didn't turn his head. He had heard worse than that in 61 years. Most of it from people who never once had to listen as carefully as he did. He just waited for the numbers to start. Harlan Voss had farmed the same 310 acres outside Loami Township for 43 years, ever since his father signed the deed over to him the spring after the flood took the lower 40. He lost his sight slowly, not all at once. A degenerative condition the doctors in Springfield gave a long Latin name to, back when he was 36. By 40, he was farming by sound and memory and feel. Neighbors used to say Harlan could tell you which gate was open just by how the wind moved through the yard. He ran a modest cow-calf operation, 60 head on a good year, and he leased 40 acres to a younger family down the road who grew soybeans and kept half the crop in trade for hauling his hay. His wife, Doreen, had passed 8 years back. His daughter called from Peoria every Sunday at 6. And most weeks that was the only voice in the house besides his own and the radio. What people in town didn't know, what they'd never bother to ask, was that Harlan had spent the better part of 3 decades listening to livestock the way other men watched them. He knew the difference between a cow breathing easy and a cow breathing tight from 40 feet away. He knew the rhythm of a healthy calf's gait against gravel, against mud, against the hollow boards of a loading chute. Doreen used to say he could diagnose a sick animal through a closed barn door, and she wasn't exaggerating much. The county had been holding its spring livestock auction at the Loami Fairgrounds for 60 years, and Harlan had gone every spring since he could walk, blind or not. This year, though, he wasn't there just to buy a few heifers and head home. He'd heard something the week before. Heard it, not seen it. In the particular way a man hears something wrong long before anyone with eyes notices it. And he'd come a listen before he bid. His notebook went everywhere with him. It wasn't the kind most people would recognize as a notebook at all. A battered braille slate and a stack of audio recordings on an old digital recorder his daughter had bought him 3 Christmases back, the kind that clipped to his shirt pocket. He used it to log weather, breeding dates, vet visits, weights. That spring, it had started filling up with something else. The trouble had started 6 weeks earlier when the county extension office had sent out a notice that the Loami auction barn's livestock scale, the one every consignor in 3 townships depended on for an honest sale price, was being recalibrated and certified by a new contractor out of the regional office. The extension agent, a brisk man named Dale Tippery who'd been in the role less than 2 years, assured everyone at the producers' meeting that the new scale was state-of-the-art and well within tolerance, and that any farmer who raised concerns about weights was likely just unhappy with low cattle prices that season. Harlan had gone to that meeting. He'd sat in the back, as he always did, and listened to the scale being praised. But something in the way the new digital readout clicked, the cadence of it, the half-second hesitation before the number locked in, had bothered him. He didn't say anything that night. He rarely did. Not anymore. He'd learned that a blind man raising concerns about a machine he couldn't see got dismissed twice as fast as anyone else. A week later, he mentioned it carefully to Tippery on the phone. "The new scale's got a hitch in it," Harlan said. "Sounds like it's rounding somewhere it shouldn't." Tippery was polite, in the rushed way busy men are polite. "Harlan, that scale's certified by the state. Class 3 load cells, NTP approved. I appreciate you calling, but I promise you it's fine." He had 4 other calls waiting and a board meeting in 20 minutes, and Harlan could hear all of that in the gaps between his sentences. "I'm not asking you to take it out," Harlan said. "I'm asking you to listen to it sometime when the barn's empty." Tippery laughed, not unkindly. "I'll keep that in mind." He didn't. Word got around. the way it does in a small county, that the blind Voss fella thought the new scale was wrong. A few people found it funny. A few found it sad. Almost nobody found it worth checking. Harlan didn't argue the point again. He went home, and he started listening properly. For the next 5 weeks, he came to the fairgrounds 2 and sometimes 3 times beyond the regular sale days, when the barn manager let him in to look over a few pens, which really meant standing near the empty scale platform with his recorder running and his cane resting against the rail. He brought his own calves first. For head, he knew the weight of almost to the pound, because he'd weighed them himself on his own platform scale at home just days before, the same trusted mechanical scale he'd used for 15 years, recalibrated every winter by a certified technician out of Springfield for $180 a visit. The first discovery came on a Tuesday morning in April. He walked his heaviest steer, a 1,310-pound Angus cross he'd weighed at home that very morning, onto the new digital platform. The readout clicked, hesitated, and settled. 1,296 pounds. 14 pounds light. Not enormous. Not nothing, either. On a load of cattle selling at the spring average of $1.82 a pound, 14 pounds was over $25 lost on a single animal. And nobody in that barn was selling just one. He wrote it down. Not on paper, into the recorder, in his own steady voice, the way he logged everything. Steer, home weight 1310, barn scale 1296. Difference 14 pounds light. The second discovery took longer, almost 3 weeks, because it wasn't about the number itself. It was about the sound. Harlan noticed that the hesitation before the readout locked, that half-second click he'd first heard at the producers' meeting, only happened when an animal stepped onto the platform from the east side chute, the side most consignors used because it lined up with the holding pens. When cattle were walked on from the west side instead, the platform settled almost instantly, with no hesitation at all, and the weights came in true to what he already knew from home. He tested it 11 times over 2 weeks, alternating sides, logging every result into the recorder with the date and the entry number. East side, light, every time, by 11 to 16 pounds. West side, accurate, within 2 pounds every time. The platform wasn't broken. It was unlevel, tilted just slightly toward the east, enough that the load cells on that side were absorbing weight the readout never recorded. The third discovery was the one that mattered most, and he found it almost by accident, kneeling by the platform's east edge with his hand flat against the concrete pad beneath it, feeling for what his eyes couldn't tell him. There was a gap, less than a quarter inch, but a gap. The concrete footing under the east legs had settled unevenly over the winter, likely from frost heave, and the new contractor's crew had bolted the platform down without re-leveling it first. A scale certified perfectly level in a shop somewhere had been installed on a ground that wasn't. He measured it as best he could with a folding rule his neighbor lent him, guiding his fingers along the blade. A quarter inch, maybe a hair more, over an 8-foot platform. Enough to throw the load cells out of true on one side only. Enough that anyone selling cattle walked on from the east, which was he confirmed by asking the barn manager outright, roughly 70% of consignors, simply because of how the chutes were built, was being shorted on every single animal that crossed the scale. He didn't call Tippery again. He didn't write a letter to the paper. He kept recording, kept weighing his own cattle at home for comparison, and kept a running tally in the recorder of estimated losses across the consignors he could track, neighbors who'd mentioned in passing what their cattle weighed at home before hauling them in. By the end of 5 weeks, his log held 31 log comparisons and an estimated collective shortfall, if the pattern held across a full sale day, of just over $1,400 in a single auction. Money quietly leaving local pockets, and nobody able to say exactly why prices felt thin that spring. The spring sale season was heating up, and so was the unease nobody could quite name. Cattle prices nationally were decent that year, But several Loami area producers had started grumbling that their checks felt low for the weights they remembered loading. A few blamed the market. One blamed his own scale at home and replaced a 15-year-old mechanical unit with a newer model out of his own pocket. $2,400, he didn't have much room to spend, chasing a problem that wasn't his. Tippery, for his part, remained confident. He'd been the one to recommend the new contractor, a company that served 4 other counties without complaint, and he wasn't eager to second-guess a state-certified install over what he still privately considered an old man's hunch. When the contractor's regional rep called to check in, Tippery told him everything was running smooth. "One fella thinks it's off," he said, "but he can't exactly point at the readout and tell me where, can he?" It wasn't said cruelly. It was said the way busy men dismiss things they haven't had time to examine. A small, ordinary carelessness that costs other people money and never quite registers as wrongdoing to the person doing it. Meanwhile, the gap beneath the east platform legs was getting worse, not better. Another frost the 3rd week of April, followed by a thaw, shifted the footing another sliver. Harlan heard it in the hesitation. Longer now, nearly a full second instead of half, before the readout caught up. He logged it. He didn't sound alarmed in the recording, just precise. East side hesitation, now noticeably longer than 3 weeks prior. Recommend inspection before May sale. He sent that exact line, transcribed by his daughter over the phone into an email, to the extension office. Tippery read it between 2 other emails and didn't reply. The May auction, the biggest of the spring, with consignors hauling in from 3 counties for the calf and yearling sale, was 12 days away, and over 400 head were expected to cross that scale. Harlan didn't ask for an inspection. He asked, 3 days before the May sale, if he could weigh 4 of his own steers on the barn scale one more time, in front of the barn manager, just to settle his own mind. The manager, a decent man named Kurt Pruitt who'd never dismissed Harlan the way Tippery had, agreed, mostly out of curiosity. Word travels in a small barn. By the time Harlan walked his second steer onto the east side that afternoon, 6 or 7 people had wandered over, including Dale Tippery, who happened to be at the fairgrounds checking on sale day logistics. Harlan's steer, 1,240 pounds at home that morning, weighed on his Springfield certified scale 2 hours earlier, read in at 1,196 on the east platform, 44 pounds light. He walked the same steer off, around to the west side, and back on, 1,239, 1 pound off, within any reasonable tolerance. Nobody said anything for a moment. Pruitt looked at the readout, then at the platform, then knelt where Harlan had knelt weeks earlier and ran his own hand along the east footing. He found the gap inside 30 seconds, because now he knew exactly where to look. Tippery stood by the rail with his clipboard half lowered. He didn't say it was fine this time. A certified scale technician, the same one Harlan used at home, called in 2 days later at a cost of $340. Confirmed the footing settlement and re-leveled and recalibrated the platform before the May sale. His written report estimated that, uncorrected, the scale would have shorted east side consignors an average of 3 to 4% on recorded weight across the sale, which on a 400 head day at spring prices worked out to a projected loss of roughly $6,800 community-wide for that single auction alone. Money quietly taken not by any person's intention, but by a quarter-inch gap nobody had thought to check. The actual cost of preventing it. Harlan's own time, his $180 home recalibration he'd already paid for that winter, and the $340 technician's fee the county covered once Pruitt authorized it. Less than $500 against nearly $7,000. Nobody announced the figure out loud. Pruitt just wrote it on a sticky note and left it on Tippery's desk, and Tippery looked at it for a long while before he said anything to anyone. The barn was quiet that afternoon in a way auction barns rarely are. No gavel, no chatter, just the low hum of the recalibrated scale settling true, and Harlan standing near the rail with his cane resting against his boot, listening to nothing in particular because there was nothing wrong left to listen for. Nobody made a speech about it. Tippery didn't apologize in front of a crowd, though he did call Harlan 2 days later, and the call lasted longer than the first one had, and ended differently. The mace sale went off without incident, waits true on both sides of the platform, and most consignors never knew there had been a problem at all. They just noticed, vaguely, that the checks felt a little more like what they expected. The story moved through Loami Township the way these things do, slowly and sideways. Pruitt mentioned it to a feed salesman, who mentioned it to a vet, who mentioned it to half a dozen farmers over the following month. Nobody printed it in the county paper. There was no plaque, no public thanks. A few of the older farmers started nodding to Harlan a little differently at the feed store, not with pity this time, but the way men nod to someone they've quietly reassessed. Harlan himself didn't change a thing about how he lived. He hauled his hay, fed his 60 head, listened to his radio, and waited for his daughter's call every Sunday at 6. When she asked him about it on the phone, he said only that the scale had needed fixing and now it was fixed. He didn't mention the 5 weeks of recordings or the 11 side-by-side tests or the quarter-inch gap he'd found with his own hand before anyone else had thought to look. Some men carry being right the way they carry everything else, quietly and without much interest in being noticed for it. If you're watching this from a county fairground somewhere, or from a kitchen table with a coffee gone cold, or from a barn where the scale's never once been questioned, hit subscribe. Stories like Harlan's don't make headlines. They just sit quietly in the background of rural life, the way most real things do, waiting for someone patient enough to notice them. If that's the kind of story you want more of, stay close. There are more out here. Harlan Voss never saw the gap beneath that platform. He felt it with the flat of his hand against cold concrete on an April afternoon nobody else thought worth their time. There's a kind of knowing that doesn't depend on eyesight at all. The knowing that comes from 43 years of paying close attention to things other people walk past. The land teaches that, eventually, to anyone willing to listen long enough. People in town still tell it as a story about a blind man and a scale, and maybe that's fair as far as it goes. But it was never really about blindness. It was about the difference between looking at something and actually listening to it, between assuming a machine is right because it's certified and checking quietly because something in its rhythm doesn't sit true. Tippery wasn't a bad man. He was a busy one, the way most people who get things wrong are simply busy, moving too fast to kneel down and put a hand against the ground. Harlan still walks his own fields most mornings, cane in one hand, the other trailing along the fence line the way it always has, feeling for the small changes the season brings before anyone tells him about them. The frost heaves the ground a little every winter, out there same as it did under that scale. Most people never notice until something gives way. He noticed before it did, because noticing for him was never optional. It was just how he'd learned a long time ago to see